Tim McKernan. All week long, we've been finding just really simple, easy comparisons. Okay, so remember, those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Okay, so recent history from the St. Louis Blues can help you, Cardinal fans, get through this season. That was Doug Armstrong very, very early in the season during that first losing streak. And he said, we're going to find out. But the one thing he did say, and I think this is why Doug Armstrong, I'm not going to say gets a pass, but has earned the respect, and like John Mozeliak has. I mean, look, this is the first real tough year for John Mozeliak. All right, so I'm just going to, here's my thoughts for fans out there calling for his head. Calm down and deal with it. Like, calm down and deal with it. You've had a hell of a run. Okay, by the way, so welcome into Friday. It's the balloon party. Today, we had a plan of attack of how we're going to approach the show. It's only 1 hour. But here's the plan for this next hour. It's ADHD radio.
Stream of consciousness.
If I may start a sentence on one topic and finish it on the other. But the one thing I do know is at 10:15, we've got Tim Taylor coming up, Blues Director of Player Personnel. The Blues announcing this morning that they've signed Dalibor Dvorsky to a 3-year contract. Entry-level contracts are 2-way contracts. But he's 18 years of age. He doesn't turn 19 until June. All right? So the likelihood of playing in the National Hockey League next year, in my opinion, not high, not good, and not expected. I could be wrong. So we'll talk with Tim Taylor about that. If he does not play here, he'll play in the Swedish League, the Swedish Hockey League, which was also the Swedish Elite League. What does that mean? Swedish Elite League, evaluating players in that league, it's a real challenge because offensive numbers don't pop. Then they get to the NHL and they pop. So we'll see how that goes. All right, I told you, random stream of consciousness. You heard Doug Armstrong there talking about kind of evaluating, and we'll see where we get to. Cardinals are there. If you listen to Martin Kilcoyne's interview with John Mozeliak, John Mozeliak's there. Well, I don't know that I want to raise the right ways. Yeah, okay, I went Elmer Fudd now on a Friday for you, too. I don't know that I want to raise the white flag.
There we go.
Right? You know, but, okay, no, raise it. So here is, in my opinion, the one thing the Cardinals cannot do as they start the second half of this season tonight against a team worse than they are. And that's important for this comment. Here's the one thing the Cardinals cannot do that the St. Louis Blues did. And again, the comparisons of these two seasons, both teams went into seasons with really good expectations. If you're the Blues, you felt like you were going into that season with one final run. Then you were hoping maybe you'd add on, and it never happened. Never came to be. The Blues were counting on the next generation of young players to step up and fuel them and put them over the top. It didn't happen. Cardinals, same thing. And yeah, you have good offense, but you still need those young players to step up and do it. Not one young player for the Cardinals, on a pitching standpoint, has stepped up. We have 3 starting pitching positions wide open for you. Take it. Take it. Nah, I don't want it. Or they're not good enough to want it. Or they're not good enough to take it. Maybe they want it, but they're not good enough to take it. All right? Same thing. All right? Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou last year, yeah, offensive numbers were good, but the all-around play wasn't where it needed to be. The inexperience, it happens. It takes time to grow, right? Okay, but here's the one thing that the Cardinals cannot do that the Blues did. And you don't want to do what the Blues did, in my opinion. The St. Louis Blues, throughout the first half of the season, screwed up winning. Then, the second half of the season, they screwed up losing. The Cardinals, through the first half of the season, have screwed up winning. Don't get hair on your chest. Don't start eating the Wheaties now and screw up losing in the second half of the season. It's not worth it. You do not have a championship team. All right, now, here's what I fully expect fans are going to go, wait a minute, Curbs, halfway through the season, the Blues were in dead last place in 2019. They won. Yeah, that team was different. I mean, that team was so underperforming what they really have. This pitching staff is performing pretty much to expectations, okay? So let's not compare the two so much there. The reality is this Cardinal team is much more like the 20 22-23 Blues team than it was the 2018-2019 team. All right? So here's what I mean by don't screw up losing now. We've been treated as Cardinal fans to such a great run. I mean, a 20-year run of good competitive baseball. You're not going to always win the last game of the year. Only one team does that. But you know, every year you've gone in with the thrill, the excitement, knowing our team's going to be competitive. That should never be forgotten. All right? And eventually those cycles are going to catch up to you because you're not drafting high. You're trying to make, okay? And then when you do, and the key is when you're in that, where you're middle of the pack, the lower end of the pack, every year when you're drafting and developing players, you've got to get your Robert Thomases late in the first round, your Jordan Kyrous in the second round, your Colton Paraycos in the third round, your Jordan Benningtons. You've got to get those with the David Backus in the second round. You've got to get those kind of players, right? Tyler Tucker, keep my fingers crossed, in the seventh round. Okay? Sammy Blais played a role in that cup run, sixth round. You got to get those guys to impact your roster. You can't make the mistakes in evaluation that the Cardinals have made that, you know, John Mozeliak clearly owns. And you might make one or two every now and then. You can't make as many mistakes on the evaluation side as they did, and then the equal number of mistakes on the free agent signing as the Cardinals have made. And a lot of them are huge, egregious mistakes. So you got to blow up whatever thought process took you in that mode has totally taken you down the wrong path, which could include your manager. All right? But since you're there, get the higher draft pick. The Cardinals actually have a chance for one of the highest draft picks they've had in ages. I'm okay if we hose the second half of the season and go get it. I'm perfectly fine if that's the case this year. Because you're not going to trade Arenado. You're not going to trade Goldschmidt. If you read Derek Gould this morning, he's been told by some people that the Cardinals have said that obviously Walker and Nootbaar are not available. You can still get some other pieces. You have a core where you don't have to go into the depths of hell like the Cubs and these other teams have done forever. You don't have to do that. But at some point, you also do have to think about winning. And the one other thing that you've got to be careful with, and it's going to go fly in the face of what I just said, but I'm okay. Don't get hot and all of a sudden screw up what could be a really important piece from a drafting standpoint. That's what the Blues did. Now, look, they get Dvorsky. We're going to talk to Tim Taylor about him. With the way the draft was this year, if it was the same draft as a year ago, it may not be that way, right? This was a deep draft. I still would have rather seen the Blues had a top 5 draft pick this year than the 10th. That's what I want to see with the Cardinals in the second half. That's what I want to see. You've screwed up winning in the first half. Don't screw up losing in the second half. As Cardinal fans, will take it on the chin because the reward is going to be better on the back end. I'll come back to this in a little bit, but we got to take a break. Dalibor Dvorsky signed his entry-level contract. Tim Taylor, the Blues director of player personnel, who runs the prospect camp, is going to give us an idea of where certain expectations should be when it comes to a player like that. That's next on the Balloon Party on 101 ESPN. Friday morning ADHD radio here on the Balloon Party. I know what we're going to talk about this segment because Tim Taylor's going to join us. After that, who do you want to see as the Blues captain of the St. Louis Blues next year? I'm going to go with the assumption. I believe that the team should name a captain. I'm not a fan of the captain by committee, the rotating thing. Because I actually believe structure in the locker room and having that one voice if you need it is critically important. And I actually believe that that's critically important to development of players, of young players, because it gives them a level of structure, security, whatever it may be, somebody to go to in the room. Sometimes when you do it by committee, you want to see who steps up. It's okay, but I don't think you see winning teams do that very much at all. So you could throw it in on the Air Comfort Service text line at 399-9646, the YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Who do you want to see as the next captain of the St. Louis Blues? And got some other things there. And we're calling this ADHD radio because my mind's in about 80 different directions, and I don't drink caffeine. So this is all natural. Whatever caffeine might be in an iced tea. I love iced tea, but outside of that, I don't drink caffeine. Tim Taylor, Blues Director of Player Personnel, slides in to join us here this morning. Tim, thanks for giving us the time and joining us on some ADHD radio.
No problem, Curbs. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. I actually was in Italy during prospect camp, so I was following on social media the best I can. So sorry I missed you while you guys were in camp. And now that you've had a chance to process it, what did you think, and how do you view the prospect camp of 2023?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you what, Curbs. It's the most exciting time I've had since being with the Blues with our young prospects. This is the biggest crop we've ever had. We've had a lot of depth with our prospects, a lot of star players, a lot of players that are B prospects. When we say B prospects, top 6 forwards, top 4 Ds. So really optimistic of where this organization's going. It's just that we have a surplus of young players that are ready to make their mark as a Blues player.
Tim, in your decade plus with the St. Louis Blues and your experience as a player in the National Hockey League as well, what can you tell now about a prospect, a player, that gives you more confidence that this player will hit the mark of, say, a top 6 player or a top 4 defenseman now than maybe you would have thought and how you viewed things, say, 10 years ago when you were a little newer into the role?
Well, I think now the way the league's going, it's a very young league, and you need your players like the Kyrous, the Thomases to take a step and be your top line forwards. And we're seeing that more so with every team now. The better teams have their young players as star players and taking more prominent roles at a younger age. I think the salary cap is the biggest issue with that. You're trying to get young guys coming in because they make the least amount of money, and you're trying to make them give them important roles right away, and really you want to grow with those guys. I look at with Kane and Taves and Chicago, that team grew with them. And obviously 3 Stanley Cups later, with Taves being the ultimate captain, that's what teams are trying to do now. And I look at where we're heading in a direction with Robert and Jordan Kyrou and young players and the new players that we brought on board to the draft this year with Tony Felton and his staff did a heck of a job. And obviously Doug with the draft, and it was we're at a point now with our organization that we're all very, very excited. Obviously, it was a down year last year, but this team's ready to take another step, get back in the playoffs, and really fight for another championship. You know what?
You brought something up in that answer there that it's something that I always kind of remember, and for folks, for those that don't know, and maybe don't remember Tim Taylor as much. It's funny because I say that because I got our producer here in Grant Francis wearing an Arenado 28 jersey, and I said, "What are you wearing, a Tommy Herr jersey?" And he goes, "Who's Tommy Herr?" Well, Tommy Herr stopped playing 7 years before Grant was born, so I got to remember sometimes who some of the listeners is. But Tim played 13 seasons in the National Hockey League and won 2 Stanley Cups. Was part of a cup with Detroit. Was part of a cup with Tampa Bay. You brought up the fact that because of the salary cap, you almost have to bring young players along, and I remember during that 04-05 lockout, Tim, and you remember obviously being with Tampa Bay at the time. One of the arguments the Players Association had against the salary cap is that It was going to force older players out of the league probably earlier than they needed to be. That's clearly happened. You're going to have your haves and your have-nots in terms of contracts, and then you can't afford to play other players. That's happened. And then it's brought young players and probably put them into the league maybe even a little bit earlier than they needed to be, and that's happened. So really some of the concerns of the Players Association back in 04-05, now that we've had the salary cap as long as we had, it's played out quite accurately.
Yeah, I would say that, but you also have to believe, like, again, I'm talking on two sides of the fence here. One as a player, because I was a player rep for our Tampa Bay Lightning team at that time, and now being in management, you see both sides, and you see kind of the way that the game has gone. Obviously, with younger players, the game has got quicker and faster, and you bring that innocence back in the game, and you've pushed older players out that before that you've had to pay because they've done something for you. Now you're paying on what young players can do for you. It used to be free agency was you're paying what a guy used to do or what he's done in the past. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that always didn't work out. I think the better chance now is hitting on guys that you're paying for his future. And now the league has recognized that. Again, you were exactly right. It was to really it was that pyramid type thing where the top guys are going to get paid, and then you're going to have the bottom guys, which are the rookies coming in the league. And then you're going to have guys, if you want to keep playing, you're going to have to stay at the bottom. And really, at the end of the day, you're going to make your money as a player. And as an older player, you got to decide, now's the time to win. Do you want to be in a championship team? Do you want to be a team that you can prolong your career and say, instead of playing 800 games, play 1,000 because you take league minimum, and then you have a chance to win a Stanley Cup? I think players realize when they get in the league as a young player, you don't realize how hard it is and how difficult it is to play in the playoffs. And then, a couple years, I had the luxury to play with Detroit. My first 4 years in the league, I was Stanley Cup Finals 2 times, won it once, and the Conference Finals the other 2 times. So it was just like I thought it was forever. I go to Boston and we lose out in the first round, then we win this next one, we win the first round. Go to New York and we don't make the playoffs 2 years in a row. Go to Tampa, luckily we get to the Stanley Cup, but we had a couple years didn't make the playoffs, and 3 years we got out in the first round. So you don't realize, and Dave Anderchuk played 22 years in the National Hockey League, was a Hall of Fame player. His first time ever being in the finals was in 2003, 2004, 2000 in Tampa Bay. His first time ever, 22 years. Wow. So as players, you got to realize it's you want to win, and you think you're going to get there all the time, but the realistic you're not, and you got to take advantage of it. So now older players realize to stay in the league, you want to go to good teams, you want to win. And it's a very difficult league. It's a very tough league. As you know, you've witnessed it firsthand in 2019 with our team going to the Stanley Cup Finals here, what it takes to win, and the guts, and you need good bounces. You need longevity with it without injuries within the playoffs. It's just a very difficult trophy to win. And I think as you get older, older players realize that, and that's why and how this pyramid's built again. We're going back to the salary cap. Is that you've made your money early as a player, as an older player, and now you're just trying to win. And you realize what winning's all about. That really defines your career.
Yeah, I love that part. Okay, let's go back to the prospects. Dalibor Dvorsky signs his entry-level contract. He's 18 years of age. Yeah, you can play in the National Hockey League at 18. European players could go to the American Hockey League, but it is such a difficult road when you're that young playing in the American Hockey League. If he doesn't play here and were to go back to Sweden, how do you assess what a player like that could be, and what are certain expectations from your perspective you have going into camp for him?
Well, you know what? What we want is him to have a really productive year, take another step in his development. Obviously, get with age and maturity, getting a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. He's got really deceptive speed, his foot speed. He takes off, and you don't think he's lightning quick, but yet he's by a D, and he can make that move. He's very deceptive. Strong lower core. He's got a great shot and really sees the game well. I think that's it. We say hockey IQ, but he's a very smart hockey player. He reads and anticipates very well. And, this year for him is just taking that another step, taking that step to be a pro. He's going to play the Swedish Elite League this year. And we feel that league is very good for development of players. He's going to get lots of ice time, be one of the top 6 players there. So he's going to get first or second power play time. He's going to play against some really good players. It's a very difficult league to play in as an 8-year-old, but he had a good taste of it here as a 7-year-old, and they expect him, and we expect the same thing, is that he's going to take another step this year. Looking forward to watching him here in the next month as Sweden comes over and plays U.S. and Finland and the Junior World Championship evaluation camp in Plymouth, Michigan. So really looking forward to him seeing what he can do this year and taking that step at a pro level.
Who else looked good for you and stood out for you at prospect camp?
Well, you know what, Curbs, again, going back, we had a really good draft. All the 3 first-round picks, 3 first-round picks, all played really well, as did everyone that we drafted this year. But I'm going to single one guy out in particular because this guy's had a heck of a road the last year and a half, and that's Tanner Dickinson. As you know, he broke his leg, his femur, in a game in the OHL. I think it was January of 2022. And basically, he's had a year and a half of missing hockey. He's had 2 different surgeries. The first surgery they did that night in Sault Ste. Marie, they did a really good job. It wasn't the job they did. They did everything possible. It was right. He had a stunted growth in his leg. I mean, the bone wasn't growing around the rod that was put in. So he had to get that rod taken out, re-drilled through his femur, and a larger rod put in. Set him back, obviously, 9 to 10 months. And this kid had come back, and he was phenomenal at development camp. His skating was so much better. He's put on weight. He looked stronger. He just looked like a very confident kid and a very hungry kid. And I felt for him because we tried to do everything we could. I'll tell you, Chris Thorburn now works on our development staff. He did a heck of a job throughout the year, keeping in contact with him, getting him into Springfield to be with our training staff there, just to get him the monotony of going through his rehab, taking him out of that environment and just trying to help keep his spirits up. And he sent him videos of him, scoring goals with Sault Ste. Marie to our Stanley Cup run and kind of, here's where you are, here's where you think you can get to. So Thor did a really good job of keeping this kid's spirits up. But I was really, really happy for Tanner. He's come a long way, and he sees the light of the tunnel, and now it's time for him to turn pro this year. So we're really excited about him. And I really want to just point him out just because of what he's gone through.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not discrediting anyone else because we had such a good development camp, and we had a lot of really good players. I was really excited about everyone. Really, at the end of the day, no one disappoints you at these camps. You're not there to make the team. What we are there for, especially newly drafted kids, is just to get a baseline of where they're at. Show them the city. Get them used to our staff. Get them their workout programs. And then feed them the expectations when they do come back the next time. Here's your level we want you at. So it's really introductory to our organization, introductory to pro hockey, and to see where they're at and get some feedback. But we were really pleasantly surprised with I would say, a lot of the guys, and it was a great group.
We're wrapping up with Tim Taylor here, Blues Director of Player Personnel, here on the Balloon Party this morning on a Friday morning. And Tim, I want to go back real quick to Dvorsky on something. The Swedish league is an interesting one for me when you look at things, because like you go back and you look at the numbers, for example, of Henrik and Daniel Sedin, 2 Hall of Famers. Guys had amazing careers, and in the Swedish league, kind of they're point of game guys. Or you look at Swedish players or players that have played in that league that come over, and offensive numbers don't jump out at you like they do with Bolduc, for example, with Zach Bolduc, and in 100 points in a 68 game season kind of thing. What is it about that league over in Sweden that either the offense is not quite like what it is, but also from an evaluation standpoint still tells you that this guy could be a really good offensive player when the numbers don't pop maybe like they do in other young leagues?
Well, again, you're talking, when you say young leagues, that CHL is a very young league, right? You're talking about 16-year-old to 20-year-olds. When you're talking about the Swedish Elite League, you're talking about men that are playing pro hockey. That's their career, right? And it's a very well-coached league. Defense is critical. I don't think a lot of people realize that. Talking about European hockey, you think of the Russian 5 that I had the luxury of playing with in Detroit, but you think about all those past teams and how offensively and creative they were. But at the end of the day, they never give up the puck, and it's a very well coached system over there. It's a bigger ice service, so it's very tight checking, and you're taught to be a pro. Coaches lose their jobs for losing there, and so they and again they lose their jobs everywhere. But it's pro hockey compared to amateur hockey that's in the CHL. And the CHL, again, you're looking at kids that if they went over to the Swedish League, probably one or two off each team would be lucky enough to play in that league. It's a very good league, and it's just a really tough league. It's very comparable to a Finnish league as well, the elite league there too. So that's why we think the growth of our players, there's three of them, Stancil and with Dvorsky playing there as well. These guys are going to get well coached, and they're going to get a little bit of taste of pro hockey. It's not all offensive hockey. You have to play the right way to get your minutes, and they're going to have to earn their minutes. And we feel it's a good stepping stone to the NHL for them.
One of my favorite aspects, and I can't wait for this moment, one of my favorite aspects, folks, of the year, believe it or not, is before game one of the preseason. We broadcast all the preseason games. Joe Vitale and I started doing this with Bill Armstrong good number of years ago, and we did it with Tim last year, is we sit down with Tim and we go through everybody in camp, all the young guys, and say, give us your thoughts on each of these guys. So we kind of get the scouting report. And I can't wait, Tim, to have that meeting again this year. Honestly, it's one of my favorites because it gives us a good idea. But one of these next times when I'm filling in again, I'm going to set you up. Maybe even if it's when you're in town, sit down and maybe do a whole hour show with you, because I think the fans would love to hear more about each of the different guys from you. But I appreciate you giving us some time here on a Friday after what's been a busy couple weeks for you.
Oh, thanks, Curbs. And I love talking about our young players. Again, our staff has done an incredible job bringing these young kids in, and looking forward to what the future holds for Blues hockey. It's going to be very exciting with all these young players coming and trying to make the Blues.
Yeah, it will be a lot of fun. Have a great rest of the summer, and we'll see you in just a few weeks.
Thanks, Curbs. You have a great day.
You got it. That's Tim Taylor, Blues Director of Player Personnel. And in the true fashion and true honor of Tim McKernan and the way the balloon party should work, I've absolutely blown the show clock. All right, back in a moment.